Thank you very much for making the trip out and attending the Tech Forum this year. We really look forward. We've got a bunch of interesting speakers. Everything is kind of catered to conversations that we've had with folks, solving people's problems and things like that. The goal was to have a lot of new technology conversation and to kind of, light a little bit of a fire under people that weren't able to go to some of the trade shows in the past year. So I hope you find it interesting, and between the presentations, please make your way over to see the vendors around the presentation room next door. And again, thank you very much for your time. By the way, I'm Steve Pennington. If you don't know who I am, I apologize. There are a lot of new faces in the room this morning. So again, thank you very much, and I hope you find everything worthwhile for attending.
Good morning. My name is Lauren Lamadou. I am the training coordinator for our training department at Bosch Security Systems. So this morning, we are going to talk about the state of cybersecurity 2022 and Bosch mitigation strategies. And I know after this presentation, you guys are all going to feel compelled to come over to the training booth where I'm going to be at after our speaker scares you a little bit. You're going to want to get training. So come see me afterwards. I'll be here the next 2 days. I'll get you signed up for training. We'll get you covered. We'll get you taken care of. But a little bit about our speaker. He has 22 years of tech training and 20 years of network training behind him. And he also holds a degree in networking and also a number of IT and network certs. So please help me welcome Dave Brent.
All right. Good morning. My name's Dave Brent. First, I want to thank Steve for having me at this presentation and giving me the opportunity to talk to you guys. I've been with Bosch for almost 18 years now. I've been in the industry, the security industry, since 2001 when I got out of the Corps. So real quick, what I want to talk to you guys today with the time that I have allotted, we want to go over a couple of things. We want to talk about basically the state of cybersecurity as it sits right now. And we want to talk about the fundamental groundwork that Bosch has laid as a road for cyber hygiene and how it's transpired over the years, okay, and what foothold we already have in that area. We also want to talk about a couple of new technologies that are coming to our cameras. We're going to talk about SCEP and Acme a little bit, and then we're going to talk about cloud-based security. So what we're going to do is, the first thing, I know I see some familiar faces out here. So who have I had the pleasure of speaking to already? If by a show of hands. And I've got some new faces out here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to sort of look at this, the cybersecurity industry. I want to take a look at the big picture, because sometimes when you're in your own little comfort zone, you're only seeing it from, hey, I've got this domain. I've got this intrusion detection system. I've got this. I've got that. I'm safe. Everything's great. So I kind of want to look at this from a bigger picture. And what I mean by that is, who out there has a KnowBe4 account or a Cyber Daily account? Anybody? So on a daily basis, there's this really great, there's a couple of really great websites you can subscribe to. One of them is Cyber Daily, and it will give you the news as it pops up on a daily basis. Now, I kind of get flack from my boss in Eindhoven because I changed my cybersecurity course that I teach pretty much on a quarterly basis. He's like, why does it change so much? It's like, because the cybersecurity industry changes on a regular basis. So what I did is I took a couple of the top news stories over just last week, and so we could get a look at what's really cooking out there in the world of cyber. And the first thing we see up here is I've got, and I know you can't see it in the back. I should have made the pictures bigger. We've got ransomware in Poland. We've got an Indian energy company that has been hacked, that is putting the electrical grid in India at risk. We got a cybersecurity attack on U.S. airports. we've got this really great article in the lower left-hand corner where cyber criminals are selling access to Chinese surveillance cameras. That was from last month. You can Google it. I think the number was about 280,000 devices with public-facing addresses. Okay, we've got critical encryption tools stolen from Siemens, and we've got a Bitcoin theft. Now, that's the major headline. So if you go and you take a look at an active cyber daily attack map, at 1 o'clock on Thursday, the current count on Thursday, just Thursday, and it's a live attack count, was up around 11 million for that day. That was tracked cyber attacks, okay? So what I really kind of want to put into perspective, so when I got in the networking industry in the late 90s and I was in the Corps, hacking, it was like I've got Joey Bag of Donuts sitting in a coffee shop and he's like, oh my gosh, I got into somebody's DMZ. But we're not dealing with that anymore. The way the landscape works is, and I know we've all heard the term now, VSaaS, video services, video as a service. In the cyber industry, we now have RAS, which is ransomware as a service. So when we're looking at this, if you go and you look at the dark web, there are places like Conti that are a franchise group. So what is transpiring right now? We'll say this gentleman right here is Conti, and I'm a wannabe hacker group. I can go to him on the dark web, and he will sell me a playbook for a specific amount of Bitcoin. Now, part of that playbook is they're actually going to take and they're going to give me the malware to inject or go after you. And the catch is, more than likely, he's going to give me your site because he's already hacked your site, so I don't even have to hack you. He is giving me information about your facility. He's already got a way in. He sells it to me. I come in, and then I do ransomware. And it's not even ransomware now. It's also extortion. Because since we've all got accustomed to the fact that there's ransomware out there and we're backing our systems up like we should have been doing for years, they're now saying, all right, we've exfiltrated your data. And if you don't want to pay me, I'm now going to release all your dirty secrets and your company's going to tank. There's a young lady from MIT named Sherry Davidoff. She literally, her company provides ransomware negotiation services. So it's almost like kidnapping. And it's kind of crazy that if you would have came to me 10 years ago and said, all right, man, you can get a negotiator for that. That's kind of insane. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Now, what I really kind of want to look at, and I want to emphasize on this, if we all just went through a pandemic, everybody was working at home. And if you come to my cybersecurity class, we spent 3 beautiful days learning how to run Nmap, Wireshark, Nessus, Nexpose. We go into Kali Linux a little bit. We get into Metasploit. We do some really cool stuff, and I show you how to lock a camera down. The number one threat to any system is the person behind the computer. We know that, right? And it can be done through the 3 Bs, which are bribery, burglary, I can't say that at this early in the morning, or blackmail. And if you get a chance, there's a gentleman named Neil Bridges. He is a former NSA hacker, and he does some really good interviews on YouTube. He has done over 5,000 pen tests. And one of the things that we stress in the cybersecurity class is the fact that not only are people the weakest link, they're easily manipulated to just do whatever you want by a little trickery. So before he goes into a site, there's this really great thing called open source information gathering. And I'm sure who has a social media account in here? Come on, be honest. God, you're bad liars. You're just terrible. Before they go and they actually pen test a site, they will literally pull financials on that company. They'll take satellite imagery. They'll figure out where the smoke pit is. And they'll go out and they'll say, to get a fake badge. Hey, I'm from IT. We want to do a test. Can you go stick this in a computer for us so that we can make sure that our network connectivity is okay? inevitably someone will go in with a rubber duck, they'll put it in the machine, and they'll have access to the entire system. Okay? So the big thing we see on this particular slide is that the average global cost of insider threats just over the last 2 years during the pandemic has rose 31%. Okay? Now the big thing on this is that for every attack that's reported, there's an average of 100 to 250 attacks that are not reported. So you get all these really great reports like the Verizon report from last year, and it gives you all these numbers, but the fact is they're skewed because you're not getting the full picture of what is actually out there. If you got hacked and you didn't want everybody to know about it, would you really tell everybody? If it's going to cause you to get a stock hit or get a black eye or a bad reputation, would you? I wouldn't. Like, nobody needs to know I got hacked. That's great. And we got to remember that the weakest link in any system is the human, because we all have a bunch of these guys in our facility, correct? Right? They don't get paid enough. And if I were to go up and say, you know, Christmas is coming. Times are tight. It's hard. Here's $500. Can you go stick this in the back of a server? Guess what he's going to do? He's going to do it because he is the weakest link. Now, if we really look at the big picture, and a lot of people don't think we're actually at cyber war. We have been waging a silent cyber war for years and years. And this dates all the way back to the Trans-Siberian pipeline explosion. Does anybody, I'm showing my age, does anybody remember the Trans-Siberian pipeline incident? The largest non-nuclear explosion on the face of the earth could be seen from satellites. And we caused it because we jimmied pipeline software that we knew the Russians were going to buy from the Canadians. So we actually caused the Russian Trans-Siberian pipeline explosion. And at the time, it was great because it saved us from having the Russians get billions of dollars in energy from Western Europe. And it sort of put the kibosh on their war machine. Now what we're looking at is we have large groups, which we are referred to as APTs. That is an Advanced Persistent Threat Group. One of the APTs that I did most of my paperwork on, or I should say wrote most of my papers on during my master's degree program, was APT 28. Now, the reason you should be afraid of, like, oh my God, it's APT 28. How many people do you have in your network department? Yeah, at your work. Yeah, in your IT department. How many people do you have? How many? He's got 30 people in his IT department. If I'm looking at APT 28, the estimated head count of APT 28 is between 300 and 500 people. They have a division that only does open source information gathering. They have a division that only writes their own malware. They have a division that puts up malicious websites. They have a division that actually does pen testing. So you've got 30 guys that are probably working around the clock, and I'm up against multiple groups that want to do whatever they have to do, and they've got a head count of 500 people that they can actually leverage and move against one target. So does that kind of make sense? We are looking at a different landscape than what we were 10, 15 years ago. Okay? Now, how this all boils in, why should I care? Bosch Security Systems. We've been making cameras forever, and I think probably the biggest, best kept secret in the industry is the fact of how long we've had our fingers in the cyber pie. Now, what I mean by that is when we acquired, and we're going to all show our age here, do we all remember way back when we had the little VIP X1 encoders, right? So the VIP X1 encoders were made by a company called VCS. And Bosch bought VCS way back in the early 2000s, and we launched our IP line in 2004. Now, the reason we bought VCS, and there were people at the time, why didn't you buy SmartSight? Why didn't you buy Axis? Why didn't you do this? The reason we purchased VCS at that time was because inside those devices, we had these really cool things called a crypto coprocessor. Now, all the way back then, we had what is called a real-time operating system, or an RTOS. And that is a closed operating system that you couldn't load anything to, no third-party apps. I can't use the camera as a weapons platform to attack your system with. And we've been able to handle certificates this whole time. Now, the cool thing about this is I'm not talking about one particular product in a line. Everything we're going to talk about over the next however long we have, it's in every piece of equipment we sell. All right. Now, the cool thing about this, and we're going to go through this nice and slow. When you're looking at a camera vendor, okay, you know, there's some cool little cameras that come out now. It's like, look, man, you've got this camera. The technology's great. It's $50. Bam. What you get when you get a Bosch camera, the footprint that you get and the backing that you get. We use what is called a secure engineering process. That means every piece of equipment we design, every piece of hardware, firmware, gets internal and third-party pen testing. Before we put it together and we send it out, we make sure that it's wired tight. We go heavy on OWASP testing. Now, a good question is, what's OWASP testing? Currently, right now, there's an estimated 35.4 billion IoT devices in the world, on the World Wide Web with public-facing IP addresses. Every one of those devices, what they have in common is that they have a web interface. If you have a web interface, that is something that I can touch. If I can get into that web interface, I can inject malicious script, and that can result in a cross-site scripting attack. Now, that means here it comes to my website, and I've got malicious code inside my camera. I can either, one, do an injection back onto the computer requesting the video, or I can take and I can swipe his credentials and send them to a different location. Okay? So the other thing we do is we make sure that we adhere to NIST standards. So everybody's familiar with that big, thick binder called NIST 800 TAC 53, right? It's like a phone book. It's great. And it defines how you have to treat data depending on if it's confidentiality, how you rate the data. So when we design stuff based on how we're treating your data, we adhere to NIST standards as they apply to a camera. We also adhere to SIS testing and STIG testing. And one of the biggest, and I'm going to say greatest advantages that we have, we are a certified numbering authority for MITRE.org. What does that mean? Does everybody know what a CVE is? A common vulnerability and exposure. So if you see somebody go like, oh man, there's this hack on the news, it will get issued a CVE number. That it is critical vulnerability and exposure, and it will give you the date. The advantage that we have, because we do that secure engineering process, we have a thing called a PSERT team. That's a Physical Security Incident Response Team. And if we find through our third-party pen testing, our internal pen testing, or a report that we have from the field that we have a vulnerability, we generate our own CVE and we have a quicker turnaround time. Our PSERT team, actually based on the severity of the vulnerability, has a specific time frame that they have to respond. They have to put out a public and private CVE, and they have a very small time to put out a new piece of firmware with an official fix. So we don't have to rely on somebody else generating the CVE. We're on it quickly. And I can honestly say this, since I've been with the company in 2005, we've had 2 CVEs in our camera. The first one was December 2018. We had an official fix in 2 weeks. And it was a theoretical buffer stack overflow. So with that being said, from a certification standpoint, and I think this is really important, all of our devices currently, we have what is called an IoT Security Maturity Model Certification. And this IoT consortium literally takes and they analyze, this is going to sort of bring some stuff together, they analyze how we do our secure engineering process. They analyze the time frame that our PSERT team actually has to do things if we have a vulnerability. They look at the entire manufacturing process, the whole 9 yards. And with that, all of our current devices are IoT certified. That means they were pen tested, both hardware and software, by an independent third-party verifier. Okay? We also now have a UL 29000 certification, which looks at the entire company and how we do stuff with internet-connected devices. And we also have an IEC 62443 certification, which also looks at Bosch as a holistic supplier of cyber secure devices. Okay? Now, the big thing on this is, and I don't think most people realize this, Bosch has roughly, and we got a lot of employees. I think we've got close to 500,000 employees now. We have 35,000 software developers, and we spend $1.4 billion a year on software security. That includes the fact that we've established the Bosch Center of Artificial Intelligence in 2017, and by 2025, every Bosch product will either be equipped with AI or manufactured with its help. So we've started our journey with cybersecurity when we bought VCS back in the early 2000s. And we are continually investing in cybersecurity because, let's face it, everything that we do right now is wired, right? Everybody's got one of these in their pocket, and you can connect to our cameras with one of these. So it's huge. All right. Now, when I talked about a closed operating system, I want to sort of get this into the preface of where we're going as an industry. Everybody remembers the old Loronix tape libraries, right? The Qualstars with the 4 gig tape drives. They were great. Everybody had big M16 DVRs. And then magically, we all went to MPEG-4 encoders. Oh my gosh, H.263. It's crazy. And then a few years back, we went to H.264. Now everything's on H.265. When I got out of the Marine Corps, if you would have said, you're going to be able to do ultra high def video, with 1,000 cameras on one network in 20 years, I would have looked at you and said, wow, you're not right. So the deal with this is every device that we have up to our CPP 7.3 devices work on an RTOS. That's some of the stuff we talked about earlier. It is a closed OS. You can't load anything up to it. Now, where the cool thing about this is all of our devices have signed firmware. And who knows what a downgrade attack is? Anybody know what a downgrade attack? Just getting these great response out of the crowd here. So a downgrade attack, if I know that you have got a vulnerable piece of firmware in your camera, and one of the things we do in the cybersecurity class, we will go out to exploit TACDB and we'll find exploits that are there where you can just download the code. And then we'll go to Shodan.io and we'll find a bunch of devices. And we look at how there's thousands of devices out there that I can take existing code and hack things that have a public facing IP address, right? And if you don't have a vulnerable piece of firmware, I can take and I can downgrade you so that now you do have a vulnerable piece of firmware. The catch with this is all of our devices have a digitally signed firmware in them. So for my technicians out there, we all know that I can't put firmware from a CPP 6 onto a CPP 7.3, right? It has to be the correct firmware because it's digitally signed. It will not fit. Make sense? Now the catch on this is when we got to a certain point with 6.5 and 6.5.1, we now have two-factor authentication, which means not only do we have digitally signed firmware that has to meet, cannot be manipulated. If someone does a reverse engineer on the firmware and tries to load it on the camera, it won't go. It's now encrypted. So having encrypted firmware keeps people from trying to do a downgrade attack on you. If someone goes and finds a really archaic way to do something on an old CPP4 device, I can't downgrade that camera to say firmware 470 or something like that. Does that kind of make sense? Now, what's happening in the future, because we've all heard the term that we don't have cameras now, we have sensors, correct? We've all evolved. We now have sensors. We don't have a camera. So what we did as Bosch, we knew that, the good old days where I had a CPP6 and basic high-def megapixel camera, I didn't have enough processor power to do some of the stuff that people want to do, like traffic analytics, a little bit more advanced IVA, crazy stuff. So what we did a few years back, we came out with a new platform called the CPP13. That CPP13 is sort of like this guy here. It's almost like a cell phone. Because what we've done is we have a Snapdragon chipset that is running an Android platform. We still have the same sandboxed OS. You can't get into it. But in the front part of that, you can now run apps. If you join a Xena or App Store, if there's certain things that you need to do, like gunshot detection or stuff like that, that the camera cannot natively do, you can load apps into that camera to help you do it. Because remember, now we're living in a world of sensors. We don't have a Qualstar tape library that weighs 500 pounds. Now, from a security standpoint, we're using the Snapdragon chipset, but we also have a 3-stage secure boot. If we're not familiar with what a secure boot is, if someone gets into the camera and tampers with it, the hardware itself, the handshake and signature between the hardware and software will not match, and the camera won't boot. So that keeps it from actually being tampered with or hacked, yes. After CPP13, we now move on to CPP14. Now, I'm going to say this for both 13 and 14. Earlier, I said we had a thing called a crypto coprocessor, right? We're going to talk about certificates in a minute. So we all know what a certificate is, right? It's a way to validate a person or a thing with a specific identity. So there are 3 basic elements that you can do security with. You can do a TPM, you can do a crypto coprocessor or a secure element, and then you can do a hardware security device. So it goes low, medium, high. A TPM is sort of like a wallet. If you were to give me a certificate, like you have, your credit card's got a TPM, I can put a certificate in the TPM. Okay? It's great. My crypto coprocessor, and we're going to talk about this in a second, because I can handle certificates, if you're in an environment where you want to produce your own certificates, my devices can generate signing requests. So I can go to your certificate authority and I say, can you please sign this? And I can stick it back in here. I can also do self-signed certificates, and I can apply those certificates to different roles, like TLS time and date, 802.1x Zero Trust Networks, Genetec Stratocast. I can do our cloud-based certificates. There's a lot of different things you can do. Now, as we evolve to CPP 13 and 14, you've heard me say we had a crypto coprocessor. Our 13 and 14s have a thing called a secure element, which is exactly like the secure element in your cell phones. What's different about these guys is they can now do 4K certificates, and they could do TLS 1.3. Because as our encryption requirements increase, because those nasty little hackers out there are coming up with new ways with AI to hack your cryptography, I need stronger actual encryption. So now with a secure element, I could do a 4K certificate and I could do TLS 1.3. Kind of makes sense? Now, the other thing we have here, all of our secure elements, and I don't know if anybody's ever heard of EAL certification. It's been around since the late 90s. It's basically a numeric value assigned by an international standard based on how secure a device is when it's manufactured. All of our devices that we're manufacturing with a secure element are automatically out of the box, if we go back here for 2 seconds, are EAL 6+, and it only goes to 7. So out of the box, you're already at a 6+ with the secure element based on the fact, and the reason we didn't get a 7 is because when we ship a camera, it comes with a default self-signed HTTPS certificate. And that's so that when you're pulling encrypted video, I've got a private key and a certificate to base that encryption off of. Okay? So, real quick, who is doing a zero trust network? 802.1x. Anybody? So this is great. A long time ago, forever ago, when we first put out our IP video line, I was talking to the guys in Germany. I was in Nuremberg, and they're like, yeah, we could do 802.1x. It's like, that's great, but nobody does it. Like, oh, people are going to do it. People are going to do it. 10 years later, we could do 802.1x, and we got a new chipset, and nobody's doing it. So last year, Steve comes to me, he's like, we got somebody who wants to do 802.1x. I was like, we can do it. I got to figure out how to do it because I think everybody during the pandemic either left or whatever. So I sat in my lab for like a month and we put this great document together on how to do 802.1x step by step. And it was easy as pie on the cameras, but guess what the sticking point was? The Windows Certificate Authority. So there's this really cool thing that we have coming out, and I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called SCEP. Has anybody ever heard of SCEP? Simple Certificate Enrollment Protocol. Now, the reason this is important, and I'm just going to skip to here real quick. If I'm doing a zero trust network, that means what a zero trust network is. That means we're going to pretend here. We're going to say the gentleman in orange is a certificate authority and you're the switch and I'm a camera. And you two are going to share a secret. He's a certificate authority, remember? You guys are going to share a secret and he's going to say anybody that shows up on one of your ports, if they don't have a certificate, don't let the light on the switch go blinky blinky. So the whole entire process is really convoluted and tough. But the cool part is you can't have somebody randomly come into your network and then just stick a cable in a port and have it work. Because I don't have a certificate, your light don't go blinky blinky. Now try to do that on a camera system with 1,200 cameras with a signing request off each camera. It's insane. You don't even want to touch it. So the deal with this is when we're up here with the SCEP protocol, it will have an agent that will plug into your Microsoft Certificate Authority or your Linux Certificate Authority. And it's just like if you were to walk into a facility and you had to have a certificate to have your cell phone work. The camera will go to the SCEP service and say, I'm here, I know the secret. The SCEP service will take and load the certificate onto the camera and you're done. Make sense? I think that's kind of cool. So you don't have to sit and program and program and program. Now, real quick, I do want to talk about certificates in all of our devices because I think this is really huge. I'm going to say that there are a few vendors that are finally coming around to go, oh my gosh, I've got this one RPEC chip that's got a TPM. I've got one or two models that have a TPM. So earlier I said all of our devices have all of these features. One of the cool things about our cameras in both the crypto coprocessor and the secure element is that when you get a camera, there are certain self-loaded certificates in the crypto coprocessor or secure element. The first one is that good old HTTPS certificate that I use for you to connect to the web. And you get that nasty little message that says this site isn't secure. And in the cybersecurity class, we talk about how to get over that. But you've also got a configuration certificate inside the device. Now, what's that mean? I'm pretty sure that we're all kind of in a government type scenario here. And if you pull a camera off the wall to get repaired, are you going to factory default it before you send it back? You don't even have to do that. If you kill the configuration certificate inside the camera, everything that you write to the camera is actually encrypted with that internal certificate. And if you delete the certificate, it takes it back to prior to factory defaults. Okay? If you're doing edge encryption or VRM encryption, we have a LUN encryption key and certificate in it. But the really cool thing is, and I didn't know this until 2016, is anybody ever heard of a thing called an eScript certificate? eScript is a company that used to do well, they still do. They did factory injection of certificates into our Bosch auto parts. Because, I mean, you probably drive a Jag, right? Okay. And when you take your Jag into the shop, you want to make sure that you're actually getting a certified Bosch repair part. You don't want a knockoff, right? You don't want a counterfeit part. They did such a good job with our auto parts, we bought them. And now when you get a Bosch camera, there is going to be an eScript certificate inside the crypto coprocessor that shows authenticity of manufacturing. So look, if you're in a facility where you've got security out the wazoo, you don't want to be hanging a counterfeit camera that could actually be a weapons platform on your wall. Because I went to Amazon and I can't find antivirus software for an IP camera. Can you? Make sense? So with that being said, when you're getting a Bosch camera, you're not just getting a camera. You're not just getting a sensor. You're actually getting a security device. Because the biggest threat to video really isn't, I could give a hoot if somebody gets a hold of my video. You're going to sit there and watch my chickens in the backyard every day? No. If you get into your regular site, how much storage do you have in your recording storage do you have at your site? Terabyte wise. 23 terabytes. I got an airport down south that has 2.5 petabytes worth of storage. If I'm a hacker, am I going to sit and go through 2.5 petabytes worth of storage to look for video? No. The biggest threat to cameras is that I can mount your device on the wall because you've got 200 or 300 of them. It's got an IP address and it's got space. If I can mount it, I can use it to laterally move through your system and or as a weapons platform to attack your system. So when you get a Bosch camera, you're actually getting a security device that you can't mount and you can't use for lateral movement. Okay? So with that being said, there's some best kept secrets inside our devices. And I kind of did this in a historical format. And we're going to do a math test. Who's good at math in here? In 2017, everything we make has a mandatory complex password. Make sense? In 2015, we actually put a login firewall into the cameras. Because if I'm going to try to get into something, there's a couple of different password attacks I can do. I can do a rainbow table attack, which I'm doing a hash version to go through passwords, or I can do a brute force attack, dictionary attack. If you have 3 failed attempts within 20 seconds from a foreign IP address to get into our camera, the camera will blacklist you. Okay? So that thwarts brute force attacks. Now, I'm not real smart. How many letters are in the English alphabet? 26. He says 26. So that's 26 uppercase, correct? And I got to have minimum 8 characters. So that's 8 to the 26th. And how many lowercase? 26. So I got 8 to the 52nd. I got 15 special characters that I can put in here. So that's 52 plus 15. Oh, you said you were good at math. 67. So I got 8 to the 67th. And I got 10 digits I can put in, right? So it's 8 to the 77th. Hey, 8 to the 77th. I don't know what number that is, but if I'm in a B-class address and I've only got 65,000 viable IP addresses, am I going to run out of IP addresses before I can brute force my way into the camera? From a lockdown standpoint, and I think this is the cool part, one of the things that we teach in the cybersecurity class is how to lock a system down. Because I have people call me all the time and say, Dave, we got a pen test on Wednesday. And on Thursday, they gave me this PDF. That's not a pen test. That's a vulnerability scan. Because a vulnerability scan can take a few seconds. I can go out and use Nessus or Nexpose. I can do the free version. Boy, if I needed a job, I'd just go around doing vulnerability scans. It'd scare the hell out of people. It'd be great. Because they put out really great PDFs, right? And I go up and say, look at what you did. And the problem is they're white boxing a camera. It's default on the thing. Nothing's been locked down. So what we do in the vulnerability analysis class or the cybersecurity class is we go through and we lock a camera down. We do a scan with Nmap and Nessus white box. And then we lock that puppy down and we do another scan. That's what we do. And the cool thing is, basically in one menu, I can make this thing Fort Knox. All I got to do, kill the HTTP port, put it on TLS 1.2, put it on HSTS, and I'm ready to rock. There's no services that are turned on in the camera that are vulnerable because we got rid of all the crap services back in 2015. Telnet, FTP, all that good stuff, right? Make sense? With that being said, I don't have to go to each camera to do this. If I'm in Configuration Manager, I can get 50 cameras on the screen. I can do them all at one time. And it's basically a couple of clicks. So I've gone out to a site to help them lock stuff down. We did a 250 camera system in 35 minutes. It's not that tough, okay? All of our cameras give you a grade when you first fire them up. The default grade is a B. You can't get an A unless you disable all the accounts that have passwords and you go with certificate-based authentication only, okay? Every once in a while, I'll have somebody say, I got it to get an A, and then they go, no, I didn't. So the cool part is, with a very easy set of clicks, I can get rid of anything I don't need based on the vendor that you're integrating with. All right. So I've got a lockdown guide that I wrote for BVMS and VRM. I've got a lockdown guide that I wrote for use with Genetec. Probably in the spring, I'm going to do one for Milestone because we're doing a lot of integration with different vendors. And depending on which vendor you're doing business with, depends on how you can lock them down. Good example, if I got a Genetec archiver, by default, the archiver is set to take HTTP. Why would I even have HTTP on? That's insanity. I want it to be HTTPS. And if they can't do it, because they're so integrated with our video SDK, I can set the archiver to RCP+. So one of the things we did with Genetec, it's not only locking the camera down, it's locking the archiver down as well. And different vendors are going to use certificates differently depending on how they've integrated with us via either OnVIF and or our video SDK. Okay. Now, with that being said, and I'm going to say this is huge. I think it's great. And I like free stuff. Do you like free stuff? Free stuff is fantastic. Yeah, it's free. So I got a question. Who is a domain admin and knows how to work a certificate authority? Give me a big thumbs up. Who knows how to type in OpenSSL and create certificates from the command line interface? I don't either. Okay, so what we've done, because most people are finally getting around to the fact that I want to use certificates, in Configuration Manager, we have a little thing called a micro certificate authority. And you can literally take and create your own root certificate with a couple of clicks and then sign certificates for all of your cameras in a couple of clicks. And now you have a complete system that is based on secure PKI interaction between a certificate and signed certificate requests. Does that kind of make sense? It's sort of like going to your own little Navy Fed bank. So when you go to the website, it's like, hey, I trust your certificate. This is good, right? If I'm in a video system, how many devices in the video system need to talk to the camera? Okay, are we talking Genetec, Milestone? What are we doing? Okay, so if I'm in Genetec, the archiver has to talk to the camera, and the central server has to talk to the camera. If I'm in BVMS, the BVMS server has to talk to it, and the VRM has to talk to it. And because we do direct playback from the camera to the workstation without intervention of an archiver and MVR, my workstations have to. So that means if I'm on an A-class network, and let's say it's subnetted down to a B, and I still got 65,000 IP addresses, why should I allow all those additional IP addresses to be able to talk to my camera? That's crazy talk, right? I don't really need anything but what is in the video system to talk to my camera. So inside our camera, we have this really cool thing called IP4 filtering. Now, what that means is you could be, let's say your IP address is 192.168.1. I don't know, 70, whatever, right? But your little group of VMS, video management system, is in the 16 network, right? That I've created. I can still have all of these IP addresses, but if I say, I only want you to take communications from these guys right here, I can map that out without affecting your IP address. And then when they try to connect to you, you will refuse their communications. Now, this is what we call really lowering the attack surface. So not only can I turn ping off on the device, not only can I turn off ONVIF protocol, turn off RTSP, turn off all those stuff that we saw on the previous slide, I can also say, by the way, I only want you to talk to these 2, 4, 6 guys over here, and that's it. So if I'm a hacker and now I'm doing a ping sweep, 1, the camera's not going to reply. And 2, if I try to connect to you because I did Nmap and it does an actual ARP scan and it's looking for MAC addresses, and I try to mount you, you're going to say, I'm not talking to you. And this literally will take, those nasty guys at IT that give you that little vulnerability scan and say, look at this, fix this. They won't even be able to scan you. Makes the problem go away very quickly. All right, real quick, I want to talk about the cloud. Depending on which sector you're in, the cloud is a dirty word, isn't it? It's a dirty word. I got a question. How many of you guys out there have remote sites, like multiple sites? Is it a pain if you get a call and you have to send somebody out to actually take care of something? So here's the deal. You're going to have someone talk to you later on about VSaaS, and this has got a little bit to do with VSaaS. We got a great tool called the Remote Portal. And a Remote Portal, and the reason I say this, I actually teach a Remote Portal class too. Go figure that one out. The cool thing about this is our Remote Portal cloud is based on an AWS infrastructure. It's based on PKI, public key infrastructure, which means every one of our devices, when you get it, has a standard static default public key. That public key is the only way that you could talk to the cloud with the camera, because the camera has a root key, a private key, okay? Now, the cool thing about this guy right here is that, and we're doing this with multiple customers right now. Let's say I've got a small chain and I've got 15, 20 stores, and each store has 25 cameras, 30 cameras, whatever. I can register those cameras out to the cloud, and it's all outbound. It's got nothing to do with inbound. So I can lock a camera down just like I described, but it's only outbound traffic. And it's only done via HTTPS TLS 1.2. Now, the cool part about this is that not only can I pull those cameras up in VCS, as Video Security Client, I can have unlimited sites, and I can have up to 256 cameras per site. I can use Configuration Manager to actually go in, and I can do remote maintenance on those cameras sitting at my desk. So if you have a site that says, by the way, I got 2 cameras where the IVA's jacked up and I can't get it to work, you don't have to roll a truck. You go to Configuration Manager, you log into the Remote Portal account, and guess what? You can see all the cameras and you have access. The other great part of this is when you're in the Remote Portal and you go and you're looking at your sites, it will tell you which cameras need a firmware update. So you can automatically push firmware updates to your devices. And here's the great part. Who has ever set IVA up? IVA is kind of tricky because cameras, like children, are different. And, I got sales guys like, you just click this one trap and it does everything. That's not the way it works. If I got one camera specifically looking at one thing, I'm going to have to tweak that algorithm for that field of view for the time I want the IVA alarm to work. The cool thing about the Remote Portal is after I get it set up, I can save the configuration of that camera in the Remote Portal. And if somebody screws up and defaults the camera, I can push that configuration back, and it pushes the IVA back onto the camera. So you're not sitting out there on a walkie-talkie telling Billy Bob, no, walk to the left, walk to the right. No, go back that way, because you're trying to get your calibration right again. Now, Yes.
How do you push that setting back? Where did you say that?
When I'm in the remote portal, once I get the camera registered, I can actually go to the camera and I can say save setting. And it will pull all the vital settings out of that camera and it will save it in the cloud and associate it with that camera.
And that's when you push it back.
Yeah. So that way, if Billy Bob didn't actually save his CFG file of the camera, I did it, boss. I swear to God, I did it. No. Yeah, but, oh, by the way, I put it on the desktop of the server and the server crashed. So now I don't have my backups. Now, I'm going to say this. Everybody is familiar with the big V hack that took place last year, right? So the deal with this is, and I'm going to put this into perspective because a lot of people say cloud and they run for the exits. The reason this is important, we said earlier that we look at things through a NIST perspective, right? Okay. Here's the deal. When you're dealing with video, there's a couple of cloud companies out there that have what is called a public cloud. And we know that there was a company that got hacked because they had a God account in their cloud, which means any tech support, sales guy or whatever could actually get into their stuff. And there was a little rinky-dink APT group that actually found the God account on the internet, and they were able to access thousands of cameras. And if you look it up, I think they actually got video from a murder interrogation. They got video from a mental health facility where they were holding somebody down and injecting them. They got the Tesla warehouse. They got the whole 9 yards. And the problem is because they had a community cloud. So when you actually do a remote portal account, you're getting your own virtual private cloud. Your cameras are the only cameras in that cloud, and you're the only one that has access to it unless you call tech support and say, I've got this camera with this MAC address that's having this issue, and they will fix it at that point. Does that make sense? So you have to look at the validity of your data, i.e., are you doing any kind of medical stuff? And is there HIPAA ramifications? How do you want to treat your data? So our cloud, if we're looking at basic NIST standards, if we're looking at, are you in a DMZ zone, a trusted zone, or a restricted zone with your data, that is how you have to look at how you're going to use the cloud, and we actually adhere to that. Does that kind of make sense? I got a real short FIPS cheat sheet up here, and I want to touch on that real quick before we hit questions for 5 minutes. Everybody knows that there's the giant FIPS monster out there, correct? All right. I want to make sure that everybody understands there's a difference between FIPS compliance and FIPS certified. And I had a very long, interesting talk with a gentleman and the reason we had this talk was because they were like, are you guys FIPS compliant or are you FIPS certified? And there's 4 little sub-levels of FIPS when you're looking at certification. And the big thing about FIPS certification is that the cryptography element that you have, if you get down to level 3, it basically, if I'm at an embassy and I'm being overrun, I have to be able to take and smash the cryptographic element. That is never going to happen with a camera that's hanging 30 feet in the ceiling. We are possibly, and I'm not selling futures, looking at the fact we may go to a FIPS certified cryptographic chip with a specific part number for that purpose. But from a FIPS compliance standpoint, and you'll learn this when you come to my cybersecurity class, if we go by the cheat sheet, our cameras are FIPS compliant. The only difference between compliance and certification, we meet all of the specs. I can do 4K keys, I can do 2K keys. If for video authentication, I can do SHA 256 for hashing. I can do all the stuff I need to do. The only thing is, I don't have a certified TPM that I can take out and smash in case my facility is being overrun. Makes sense? Yes, sir. So if you're dealing with the fact that you're worried about cyber attacks and your employees are not happy with the fact that you're locking stuff down, so here's the deal. As an organization, you have to look at the fact the weakest link in any system is a human. And one of the things that we cover in the cybersecurity class are some of the social engineering tools out there, like a rubber duck, a land turtle, and all the things that you can plug into your ports and all that good stuff. there are restrictions you're going to have to put onto your employees, and they're just going to have to roll with it. I mean, it's tough, but that's kind of the way it is in this day and age. You have to lock stuff down, because if you don't, I mean, we saw in one of the earlier slides, we're looking at actually ransomware as a service. And I think if you look at some of the Neil Bridges videos on YouTube on pen testing and vulnerability analysis, red team, blue team, I think that kind of puts things into a good perspective. You had a question, sir?
Yes. So my question is on the cloud services.
Okay.
So, everybody's saying, okay, you got to go to the cloud, go to the cloud, go to the cloud. But isn't the cloud still, you have these servers that have to be maintained by somebody to still do that, and can be easily hacked also?
Okay.
And how do you confirm who's holding your servers when they come and say you got cloud services?
Okay, so here's the deal. I don't know about other vendors. I know that when we're doing our remote portal, we do stuff through AWS. And I don't know if you've ever been on an AWS facility. Okay. So we're talking about the fact that they've got different sizes. One of the ones I frequently visit, I think, has 6 million hard drives spinning at one time. Hard drives don't go 5 to 6 weeks before they're shredded. The physical security to get in the building is ridiculous. If I try to walk out of the facility and I got a Fitbit in my pocket, it's going in the laptop shredder. When you're looking at the cloud, and I've got a better chart of this I don't have in this presentation, the cloud vendor is in charge of physical security, and depending on what you're implementing in the cloud, like if I was doing Azure and I was doing all my servers and services in the cloud, I would be responsibility for the Windows security aspect of that. What we're doing is we're spinning up, when you create a remote portal account, you get a virtual private cloud. And with that virtual private cloud, you are now logging in and you're getting an interface. It's a limited interface that only really communicates to the cameras and to you via password and PKI. So there's not a really large attack surface to get to begin with. Okay. Now, from the aspect that, somebody might hack into my cloud, there's really not a whole lot there. Now, when you get to the VSaaS section, where we start talking about actually recording to the cloud, that we have two clouds. We have a nice white fluffy cloud, and we have a really big cloud that can offer you a lot of different stuff. And they're going to cover that later on. Yeah.
When you're talking about you giving a company through your remote service virtual private cloud, is that similar to partitioning a space for that company in the cloud?
Okay, so and I'll go backwards here real quick. So what will happen is, if I go to the remote portal and I create an account, all right, just for the remote portal, it will spin you up automatically a VPC. That's a virtual private cloud. If you go to our cloud services and you want a specific cloud for multiple, monitoring, response, recording in the cloud, you put in a work order, and within 5 to 7 days, you will have your own giant cloud for whatever you're doing. So if you're going to run a response center, and then you want to charge customers for your service of monitoring 24/7, you can do it that way. You can literally spin up your own monitoring cloud, and then you're reciprocally charging your customers for the service of 24/7 monitoring and response. So, like I said, there's two clouds. There's a nice little fluffy cloud that makes your life easier, and there's a big cloud. And depending on how you want to utilize that cloud is completely up to you.
And that amount is a calculation that you figure somewhere on how much cloud space I need, and then it's a piece of the cloud, and is that the services provided?
Yeah, the services that you're going to use. And it really depends on the services that you want. And a lot of people are like, oh, we'll just record in the cloud. I'm going to tell you right now, unless you have a giant pipe, because let's face it, we sell a lot of ultra high def cameras. There's a lot of people selling a pipe dream going, oh, you've got 1,000 cameras at your site, record everything in the cloud. You've lost your mind, because you don't have a pipe that big, and you're going to be spending money for very high definition cameras, and you're going to be recording at a very low frame rate with a very low definition if I've got that many cameras. And that's why we have encrypted edge recording, so that you can record at the edge, without even a VMS, and you can record your high quality video, and then you can still access that via the cloud off of the camera in an encrypted fashion. So there's different ways to actually skin it. And thank you very much. Hoorah.